There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cameron Chronicles. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here joined with my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. Good to be back.
Yeah, should be a fun one. We will talk about Duke basketball's game against Kentucky, the Champions Classic. I traveled down to Atlanta to cover that game. The Blue Devils fell to the Wildcats 77-71 there. 77-72. Get my score right. In a close contest, and then bounce back against Wofford, but have two exciting games coming up on the docket. One against Arizona on the road, kind of a rematch from last year's game, and then going to Vegas to take on Kansas. That should also be a super exciting game, and these non-conference tests early for John Shire's bunch will be really key. So we'll jump into all of that. Should be a fun episode. We're going to welcome Ben Hooke of Kansas Student Newspaper later on in the show. He'll preview the Jayhawks, and we'll talk about that. So that should be super fun. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise in the world that comes to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. So talking about that Kentucky game, I'll talk about my takeaways in a second there, but I'll start with you. What stood out from that game? What do you think led to the Wildcats coming out on top of that one?
Yeah, I think Duke just had an uncharacteristically bad shooting night on the whole. Kentucky obviously is a team that is very good shooting the three. What were they started out, like 6 for 6, 7 for 7 from three?
Yeah,
something like that.
5 or 6.
Yeah. And so Duke was 4 for 24 from three.
Mm-hmm.
That is not going to work against top teams if you want to win big games like that. I think Conklin-Nipple was 5 for 20 from the field. That's something I don't foresee happening much throughout the course of the season, but obviously, first big game for a lot of these guys. High stakes, veteran team in Kentucky that they're going against. So I think just a bad shooting night, really. I mean, make a couple more of those open threes, like, you probably win the game. And the one that really stood out to me was Caleb Foster had a wide open three, missed it, got his own rebound, wide open again, missed it again. And that's kind of just how I feel like it went for Duke, especially in the second half. They just couldn't get one to fall. And so I thought that was just the biggest thing to me. It was just missing open threes.
Yeah, you're right. The first game of the season, or first big game of the season for this team, you saw a little bit of nerves out of the jump from both squads, but Kentucky really did shoot well. But I think Duke pretty much dominated, in my opinion, from that middle of the first half to the middle of the second half. It felt like Duke was in control, and Kentucky made a lot of runs, and Duke had an answer for everyone. Really taking the lead and keeping its lead throughout until the very end. And I think part of that is the fact that Malawach and Sion James both got hurt in the second half. And this team was tired down the stretch. Cooper Flagg admitted it in his post-game press conference, which is understandable. He played all 20 minutes in that second half. And with those injury concerns, it's hard for Shire to, throw in like Isaiah Evans or Darren Harris, like within, 5 or 6 minutes left in a game like that. It's super hard. So, he stuck with the guys he had, which is totally understandable. But you see a lot of people are playing big minutes. Khan played 37, Tyrese 36. And nobody on Kentucky played more than 31. So that depth difference, I think, really made the difference in the end. Just because of the injuries that happened, I don't see it. If injuries aren't a concern later on, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. But that did contribute to the tiredness. And I think, Kentucky's just offense was very impressive to me. The way they moved the ball, the way they cut. This is an experienced group, and Andrew Carr really took over down the stretch. So kudos to the Wildcats.
Yeah, going off what you just said, you saw, and credit to Mark Pope, I mean, I think he's a great coach, and you saw as soon as Sion and Common went out, they really ramped up full court press, because why not? I mean, Duke's playing with 6 players at that point, and let's press and get them tired, So I think it was a great strategy, and especially when Malik Brown was in foul trouble and they kind of had to play timid on defense, just for fear of, like, if someone else went out, like, they're, like, have 5 guys that can play. And so I thought it was really smart by Kentucky, and obviously, like you said, really good roster, really good. I mean, we saw I think Kentucky dropped like a documentary or a recap of the game, whatever they called it. And they had the huddle where Mark Pope said, Cooper Fly's going to get the ball, he's going to turn and spin and steal the ball. And then Lamont Butler stole the ball and they won. And so, I mean, credit to Mark Pope. I think they have a really good team, and I think they're gonna be a team that we see, in the thick of it by the end of the tournament. At the end of the
A couple bright spots for me for Duke that I noted during the game. One is turnovers, or lack thereof, until the very end. Duke only had 1 turnover in the first half, I want to say, and then the 2 by flag at the end. But take that out of the game, and they only had 7 total, including those. So I thought Duke did a good job of taking care of the ball in offense. even if, the shots weren't going in for the majority of the game. Duke did a great job with that. I also thought, at least in the first half, Tyrese Proctor had a really, really good game, and I would have liked to seen him, take a few more shots in the second half. Sometimes it just doesn't work like that. But he's been great behind the arc to start the season, continued that against Wofford. But his presence and his stability and his leadership really helped, I think, this team throughout the game. Any other players stood out to you or anything you noticed?
I mean, yeah, I think the big thing is, the 2 turnovers at the end are the big story, but Cooper Flagg was
He
spectacular.
was phenomenal.
I mean, he had 26 points and 11 rebounds for a freshman in the Champions Classic against a team where their average guy was probably like 4 years older than he was. He's 17 years old. I mean, he had the 2 bad plays at the end, but he's a kid. He's going to learn from it, and I'm sure he puts a lot of weight on himself for what happened at the end of the game. But I mean, without him, Duke's not even close to beating in that game. At a point, he was the only one that could get a bucket for them, and so I don't blame Coach Shire for going to him at the end. And I think if they had the same choice, they would probably do it again.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was phenomenal. There was a couple little and ones he had, which I was just like, whoa. I think what I would like to see a little bit is if you're going to give Cooper the ball at the end, maybe have him in the short corner or the elbow a little bit, so puts less onus on him, and he's so good operating out of those positions that I think he can finish one-on-one. He's at those spots. It's hard, when you get the top of the key and you have people converging like Lamont Butler and everyone. So maybe that can, set him up for success later. But he was, just absolutely phenomenal throughout, and his effort just tremendous. And, as a whole, this team showed a lot of heart and effort, and it was a great game from both sides. But yeah, somebody's got to win, and Kentucky did that. But then the Blue Devils bounced back in a big way against Wofford, and my God, on both ends of the ball, and just demolished the Terriers 86-35. Again, not the same, Wofford teams of the Fletcher McGee's of the world and stuff like that anymore, but still a decent bunch, and Duke just completely shut them out throughout. What did you notice from that game?
Yeah, I think it was the least points they've allowed in the first half, and maybe like since the shot clock came around. I think that's what the stat was. They had, I think, 12 or 14 in the first half. Wofford did, which is unreal. Like, that's unreal. I think part of it for Wofford was they just missed a lot of open looks. They had a lot of open looks in the first half, I thought, on threes, and they were chucking threes. Wofford does that. They always have. They shot 33 threes, only made 5. That's not really going to work. I guess the team is good as Duke. Thought it was just good for Duke to get, some other guys reps. Isaiah Evans had 14, 4 threes. Patrick Ngongwa made his debut.
Yeah.
I thought he looked pretty good in the limited minutes he played. We'll see if he becomes the staple of that big rotation. But he had 6 rebounds, 2 points, 2 assists, a steal. So I thought he looked good. And then, the starters played limited minutes, but I thought they all looked pretty decent in the minutes they played.
I was really impressed with Ngongwa. That was my takeaway on. I had seen him play a little bit, but you obviously want to wait until he plays in a collegiate game. But his feel and his touch and the way he passes the ball was just phew. Like, he was skipping cross-court passes. He had a couple offensive rebounds where he's tipping the ball and falling on the ground, which led to some threes.
5 offensive rebounds out of his 6 rebounds.
Yeah, there's I think 2 in a row in one sequence. One of our writers, Miles, wrote a great sidebar on Patrick and the teammates kind of reacting to him. But he was impressive down low for me. Like, just his feel of the game was better than I had previously thought of, especially for someone who had their first, collegiate game there and coming off an injury. Shire said he's going to play limited minutes throughout the rest of the year, which I think he means calendar year. But maybe he, ramps up his minutes in the second half of the year. It could be big for Duke. But yeah, just across the board, really dominant performance and great shooting for Duke behind the arc, and a really good bounce back and confidence booster heading into 2 tough games that we'll talk about right after the break. All right, we're back to preview the Arizona game. So Duke will take on Arizona again at their stadium Friday night, like I mentioned, in a 10:30 Eastern contest.
Woo!
Late one for the kid. But anyway, this team has lost a couple pieces, Omar Ballo, but has their kind of guard core back after their Sweet 16 run where they lost to
Close.
There you go. So Arizona started 2-1 on the year, gave up 103 in a loss to Wisconsin on the road. Wisconsin was really able to connect from deep. John Tanji was incredible. He scored 41. They were 44% from 3, and they really got to the line a bunch. 47 free throws. Tanji had 22 of them himself. But looking at the Wildcats, obviously some familiar faces that I'm sure you'll talk about. But previewing the Wildcats, what's your scout on this team, and what should Duke look out for against Arizona?
Yeah, 2 things. I guess I'll go with 2 things, and then you can add. First thing is they play so fast. They're 6th in tempo right now in the country. Obviously they just played a game that was 200 points were scored. So obviously, they move the ball a little bit. So they're going to push it up and down the floor. They have the guys. They have a pretty deep roster. They're going to run. They're running right now with Krivas, their usual starting center, is dealing with some injuries, ankle injury. So they're kind of running a small ball lineup where they just push the ball down the floor, which will be interesting to see how Duke can handle that. And the other thing is they've been great on the glass. They're first in the country in offensive rebound percentage, and they give up the second least amount of offensive rebounds. And so they've been great on the glass. Toby Awaka has been outstanding as their small ball center on the glass. And so I think for them, I mean, they're going to try to push the ball the best they can, and then if they miss, they're going to try to get offensive rebounds with him and go from there.
Yeah, a couple players down low that do well. You mentioned Krivas. He has a great little right-handed hook post move. Still not fully there on the left side, but he's coming back from injury. But he's a solid offensive player that can really score down low, and I think can make things tough on Malawach. Defensively, he's a little bit slower on the pick and roll and can lead to. I think Duke can really expose Arizona on the pick and roll. When you had against Kentucky that little series where I think it was Proctor and Malawach, and then they switched it a little bit and Khan and Malawach, and it was just beautiful. So I think if Duke can really use that to its advantage against Arizona, that'll be good. Awaka is solid, like you said, but no 7-2 for Malawach. A couple players that I like on this team. Trey Townsend, the Oakland transfer, is a good body down low. He can score. He can finish down low. Also, Jaden Bradley, who is their leading scorer currently, but he is averaging 14 points a game. He can shoot it. He's really coming on from last year. He was kind of settling in to a bench role last season where he developed and towards the end of the season made some big threes in the tournament. And then now he's one of the starting guards of this team and can score kind of from all ends. And he is a great defender as well. Usually will probably guard the best guard on the opposing team. He's a solid, efficient scorer that I think, could fill up the stat sheet against Duke and is somebody to watch against the talented defensive backcourt that Duke has itself.
Yeah, let's talk about him. I think Caleb Love, obviously, it goes without saying. Duke fans are very familiar with the name Caleb Love. Last year at Cameron, he didn't have a great game, but hit the winning free throws to sink the game for Kansas and had plenty to say to the Cameron Crazies after the fact. So it'll definitely be not many guys left on this team who have played against Caleb Love, but I think it'll definitely be interesting. The fan base will definitely have not a lot of love for Caleb, and he's
what you did there.
Yeah. He's kind of struggled to start the year. He's 5 for 19 from 3. He's been a streaky shooter his whole career from 3, but surely against Duke he'll ramp those numbers up. He was the Pac-12 Player of the Year last year. I mean, he's going to be their leading scorer this year. He's a great guard, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm assuming Tyrese Proctor will probably guard him, and it'll be interesting to see that matchup one more time.
Yeah, and Wisconsin did kind of an interesting thing where they face guarded him a lot of the time, and that kind of threw him off his rhythm. And so I think you could see Duke kind of try to frustrate him by face guarding him or doing a little bit of, denying him the ball and pressure and make somebody else, bring it up the court and score. But you're right. He's just such a crapshoot scoring wise. Like he could go 6 for 8. He could also go 0 for 8.
Exactly.
But who knows? But stopping him will be a key to stop Arizona. Yeah, so again, this team is talented. This team is experienced, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're as good as they were last year. And especially early in the season, I think it's more of a work in progress for both squads, but playing on the road is difficult nonetheless, especially in their arena. So should be a good one and a great test for Shire's bunch, a really true, road game. Even though I felt like the Champions Classic was kind of 70-30 Kentucky. But
Atlanta.
This will be like, the road contest. And then Duke will travel to Las Vegas a few days after to take on Kansas in the Vegas Showdown. We're going to be joined right after the break by Ben Hooke, who's one of the sports editors of the University Daily Kansan. All right, welcome back to the Cameron Chronicles. Like I mentioned, we're here joined by Ben Hooke. He's one of the co-sports editors of Kansas Student Newspaper. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Pleasure to be on.
So just to start out, Kansas obviously preseason number 1, a lot of hype surrounding this program. Started the season 5-0, couple big wins, defeated North Carolina and then Michigan State over at the Champions Classic. What are just some of your overall takeaways from the start of the season for Kansas, and what have you seen from the team so far this year?
Well, it's been interesting, I think. I think really the apex of this early season, which I think was expected, was the North Carolina game, which I think showed a lot of like what this team is made of so far, which is that for a half of basketball, we looked like the best team in the country by like a wide margin. And then for a second half, we looked far from that. But they managed to finish it out in the end. So I think it's been good. I think the key to this team is that it's clearly not a finished product yet. And there's a lot of hypotheticals in place where, like, hypothetically, there's more shooting on this team than there was last year. Hypothetically, there's more players who can create their own shots off the bounce than there was last year. In practice, that hasn't quite happened yet. Zeke Mayo has been really the transfer who's adjusted the best, I think. He's been excellent, even when he's been in a bit of a shooting slump. But I think you look at AJ's story, he's still struggling to figure out where his place is on this team. You think about Ryland Griffin, who has been sent to the bench a couple of times this season because, he hasn't played quite the right defensive assignment, or he hasn't taken the right shot in transition. So there's a lot of pieces that are still sort of working together. But I think the thing that you could see in that North Carolina game, and whether that's the team, whether that's the atmosphere in the best venue in college basketball, all of that, the half finished product is still pretty gosh darn good.
Yeah. Were you there over in Atlanta for the Champions Classic game? Did you travel to that one?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable, honestly. We showed up. It's a pretty dead atmosphere because Kansas fans didn't really seem to travel for this, and there were some Michigan State fans, and they certainly got lively, and they had a lot of things to say to Hunter Dickinson, which is, fair enough. But yeah, it was just ugly basketball.
Yeah.
I think it was good to see that Kansas could win a game where they just weren't coming out flying and on fire, and it was just like, yep, we're going to throw it into the big man about 12 times, and he's going to hit that lefty baby hook a bunch of times. But like encouraging that they got the win playing ugly, but Self and Tom Izzo both said it after the game. They were like, yeah, both teams sucked.
Yeah, I was able to catch a little bit of it because we were going back into the media room before the Duke game. Did you have trouble finding the media entrance, or was that just me? Like, it was like in the craziest location.
It was exciting. Yeah. It took me a little while to find it. I was there with a whole slew of people from Kansas.
I was
it was a bit of a sketchy entrance,
right? Yeah,
you got there.
Got there.
So it was good.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, you just talked about, obviously Kansas has won some not so pretty games so far. What do you think the biggest weakness of the team has been so far this season?
A couple of things. I think one, the Dickinson question is always going to be in place, where Dickinson is obviously a massive floor raiser because you put him out on the floor for 30 minutes and he's going to give you 18 and 10 without really seeming to without effort, and also seemingly in the ugliest way possible, which I think is sort of fascinating. But, there are games where he's not on, but still the default is just to toss the ball into him. And that could lead to some issues. I think other weaknesses are just like, what happens when the shots aren't falling? And that's happened a couple of times this year, where Kansas has been generating good looks for good shooters, and they haven't necessarily gone in. So I think those two are going to be questions. And I think defensively, there's still some things to work around, where you've obviously got DeJuan Harris, who's an excellent guard defender. Ryland Griffin, who one-on-one is a very, very good wing defender. He's struggling a little bit with the team defense. KJ Adams, I think, is one of the most underrated defensive players in the country. He's excellent, can guard 1 through 4, or really guards 3s and 4s, but can guard 1, 2, and even 5s on switches. But I think there's some issues where with how you have to play around Dickinson, where Kansas tries to use his sort of size and length rather than his speed by sending two at the ball on screens. And then the rest of the team isn't quite as good at rotating. So against Michigan State, for example, Michigan State a couple of times just took advantage of the fact that whether it was Griffin, Store, or whatnot, they're not tagging the roll man on that weak side help.
Right.
And so they're getting lob dunks off. And that's bad. So I think the defensive side, Kansas has some questions with how they play around Dickinson. I think that will come as the newcomers sort of figure out where they have to go in the system.
Yeah, that's great analysis there. You mentioned a lot of players, and obviously this team brought in some transfers, got some veteran pieces. What are one or two maybe underrated players that you think could have a big impact against Duke that maybe Blue Devil fans should look out for? Maybe, obviously besides Dickinson and some of the big guys there.
He's been around for a while, so you've probably heard of him, but I think KJ Adams is going to be massive. I think he will, in all likelihood, be the guy tasked with guarding Cooper Flag, which is by no means an easy task. I think Mehdi would say would be a very, very hard task. But I think Adams is up for it. And when you get in these high tempo games, he is just so exceptional because he makes everyone else's job easier on defense. He runs the floor, super, super active as a cutter, makes plays out of the short roll. I think he's going to be crucial. The other thing I think you look at is we have all these transfers, of course. We got Store, we got Zeke Mayo, we got Ryland Griffin, Shaquille Moore coming in from Mississippi State, who's been like a good defensive guard. But I think that the real underrated player is this guy, Diggy Coit. 5'9", transfer from Northern Illinois.
I love that.
And he just comes on the floor like, mid 2010s Dion Waiters with just like the confidence to take on hell with a squirt gun. He's coming out. He's going to shoot. He's going to shoot threes as soon as the ball hits his hand. He's going to make plays in half a second. He pressures the ball all the way up the court. He's little, but he is fearless. I think, when he comes in off the bench with 9 or 10 minutes to go in the second half, that team's first unit is gassed or something, and here you got this little 5'9" rage monster running at you. It changes games.
I absolutely love that. I'm excited as a 5'9" man myself.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, what do you think Kansas's keys to win are for this one? And then do you have a prediction for us, final score prediction for Tuesday?
Kansas has to make shots. I mean, that's first and foremost is they have to stretch the floor and they have to, bang a couple of threes, make sure. I think Dickinson's work down low and in general how they attacked Haman Maluak is going to be really, really important because if he's off the floor, Duke's a different team. And so I think that will be a big thing. Yeah, I think really the key is that Kansas just can't get boat raced. And I think Kansas has the experience, the playmakers, the shot makers, the guys who've been there before, that if this ends up being a 5-point game in the final 4 minutes, I'll turn it off. I think Kansas wins. Because I think Duke's excellent. No doubt about it. I think this was one of the best Duke teams they've had since, the 2019 team of Zion and all the freshmen. But I think in these close games and these end of game spots, I don't quite know. I think experience matters, and Kansas has a ton of it. So I think that's big for me. But if Duke gets out running and this turns into a track meet and Cooper Flag is making plays in the open floor and putting guys in body bags when he goes up for dunks, I think Kansas doesn't have much of an answer. But give me Kansas by 7.
Okay.
In like a pretty well scoring game. Let's go like 75-68, I think.
Nice.
All right, man. Well, that's great. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but thank you. You gave some great answers and great analysis. I'm super excited for this game. It should be a good one, but thank you so much for joining us on the show, Ben.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, that was some great analysis there from Ben. I feel like I know a lot more about this team and prepared to watch this, but like Ben said, it should be a great one and a lot of things to look out for with this experienced, talented veteran team. Kansas, what's your preview on the Jayhawks, Caleb?
Yeah, I got to watch like the last 15 minutes of their game against North Carolina, and it was the bad half of the game,
half,
as Ben alluded to. The thing that stood out to me really was, like you said, the shots were not falling for Kansas in that half, and it seemed to really rattle them, which, I mean, happens for any team. I mean, that's pretty natural, but The thing that stood out to me, and I think the thing that'll be important for Duke is teams really want to drag Hunter Dickinson out to the perimeter and make him defend. And Ben's kind of said that too. Like on the ball screens, teams kind of attack them. And so far, Duke's ball screen game has been really good. I mean, that Tyrese Proctor, Kyle Malawatch pick and roll was spectacular against Kentucky. So I think if they could drag Dickinson out in space, he's going to score his points in the paint. Like that's just going to happen. But if they can really expose him on the defensive end, I think they could have a good chance.
Yeah, I think one thing Duke is going to be tasked with, and this is a team that has big guards along with Duke. So the size there, with the exception of DeJuan Harrison, I guess David Coit, like you mentioned, Zeke Mayo, AJ Storr, all KJ Adams are just solid wings that are gonna be able to combat, the height of Proctor and Foster, to where like even against like a team like Kentucky that had a few shorter guards and other teams, Arizona has some shorter ones as well. These guys are going to be, big defenders against those guards. So I think it'll be really important, especially for Proctor and Foster and Con Knipple, those three, like the guards here, to establish their game offensively, because there's going to be a lot of tension on the flag. But if they can create their own, use the pick and roll, get to the basket and spread out, Kansas, that is going to be big, because obviously Hunter Dickinson's great inside, but I think Duke's offense is at its best when Proctor and Foster are able to drive and kick and use the pick and roll and spread teams out, and Duke is swinging it on the perimeter, because I think Duke does a great job moving the ball around the perimeter. But that'll be big for me. That's the key kind of I'm watching for this game. All right. Any predictions across the board for both Arizona and Kansas? How do you think Duke finishes this 2-game stretch? And yeah, start with you.
Yeah, I think they're two very different games and different game plans for Duke. But I do think the Blue Devils win both. I thought originally coming in that they would probably go 2-2 in this little 4-game stretch, whatever you want to call it, gauntlet they have. So I think they win these two, and then we'll talk about Auburn next week, but probably lose to Auburn. But so for me, I think last year against Arizona, you saw Omar Ballo kind of manhandled the game against Kyle Filipowski down the paint.
Yeah.
I think Duke could have the opposite thing happen. They have if Owaka started, they have a massive size advantage with Kyle Malawatch. I mean, he's ginormous. And so I think if he's assertive down low, I think they can definitely control the game in the paint. And obviously, like, Caleb Love might get hot and hit 10 threes. But from what we've seen so far, Arizona struggled shooting the ball. And so I think if Duke has a game that's back to their mean of shooting threes, they should be able to get it done in a hostile environment. And then Kansas, I think, the same kind of thing. I think they can really expose Dickinson in the pick and roll. Kind of the opposite problem of Owaka. I think Dickinson is just not fast enough to keep up with Kyle Malawatch on the pick and roll. So I think the freshman center is really going to be the hinging point for both games. But I think Duke can come out with a win for both.
Yeah, I think you're right about Dickinson on the defensive end. I think offensively, Kamen has not seen somebody as nearly as offensively skilled as Dickinson. And it's going to be kind of a, welcome to college basketball moment, I think, a little bit for Common. I think Dickinson is going to be really, really effective down low. And if Duke can, at least limit him a little bit, I don't think Duke's going to stop him at all. I think he could really lead his team to victory just because of how much experience he has and how great he is down low. You saw Andrew Carr kind of take over late, and I think Common's done a great job adjusting, and I think he'll be phenomenal for this team. But I think this early in the season, Hunter Dickinson is really going to have an advantage. And so I think Duke finishes probably 1-1 out of this 2-game stretch. Right now, I'm leaning towards a loss against Kansas and a win against Arizona, but I feel like I could easily flip that just because of how hard it is to play in Arizona. But I think Duke matches up better with Arizona than Kansas.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. But, it's going to be 2 great games regardless, and I think, great opportunities for this team immediately to get used to playing big-time college basketball. So should be a fun season ahead and exciting games for that. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back to recap these 2 games, tell you guys what happened, and preview the Auburn game coming to Cameron Indoor Stadium for the ACC SEC Challenge. I want to say December 4th-ish. Yep. Somewhere in that area. I'll have to fact check. But that is going to be a phenomenal game because of how well, Auburn is starting. It's going to be a great environment, but we'll be there to talk about that. Check out all our website, all our coverage, DukeChronicle.com. We have great preview coverage, game recap stuff. A lot of great stuff across the board. If you're on campus, our print editions are still out on shelves, so definitely pick that up. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been the Cameron Chronicles.